Good evening. My name is Szonert-Binienda. I'm the president of Libra Institute. Our institution was involved in co-sponsoring a seminar on Katyn in February 2011. As a result of that seminar that took place at Case Western Reserve University School of Law in Cleveland, there was an expert report put together that was published. In fact, the special Katyn issue of the Journal of International Law of the Case Western Reserve has just been posted online yesterday. It includes 7 articles on Katyn that relate, basically those are the papers that were presented at the Katyn Symposium in February of 2011, and currently this Katyn issue of that Journal of International Law is online. That includes also the expert report that was put together by the panel of experts that included Dr. Mark Kramer, and this report recommended, among other things, the proactive search and declassification of Katyn-related documents in the National Archives, and that's what we are celebrating today, the phenomenal conclusion of that recommendation. But it also recommended proactive dissemination of the Katyn-related information, because it was recognized that for 70 years, over 70 years, the Katyn truth has been suppressed. So in order to balance this distorted view of Katyn by the public in the United States and in Europe, there is a need for proactive information about the truth of Katyn as we know it today, although we don't know the full truth, but we are getting closer. I also want to point out that the Libra Institute, on the request of the National Archives, put a special booklet, a collection of essays, that's supposed to be a background reading for the disclosure of today's materials. We would like to briefly read to you is a statement of the community. Libra Institute collaborated on this effort towards the disclosure of Katyn documentation with the Katyn and Siberian communities throughout the United States. And we have been working together on this effort for the past 2 years. And I would like to read a statement of Katyn and Siberian communities in the United States involved in advancing the progress on 2012 declassification and public release of Katyn documentation. The Katyn and Siberian communities across the United States involved in advancing the release of the Katyn documentation welcomed the declassification and public release of Katyn records of permanent historical value in the possession of the United States government that relate to the extermination of the Polish citizens between September 39 and June 41, symbolically known as the Katyn atrocity. The release of the Katyn documentation by the United States National Archives more than 72 years after the crime has a symbolic meaning. It underscores the enormity of the Katyn crime, but reminding us that to this day, the full truth about this unprecedented crime of historic proportions have not been revealed. The 2012 disclosure represents an important step on a long journey towards the full disclosure of the scale and character of the Katyn crime. To remedy the tragic neglect and marginalization of the Katyn and Siberian communities, to address the harm suffered by the Katyn families, to recognize the destructive effect of the Katyn trauma on the Polish-American community, to remedy many decades of suppression of information about the real scale of the Katyn crime, the Katyn and Siberian communities in the United States call upon the United States Congress to establish the Katyn Institute as a gesture of goodwill to redress past wrongs. We shall be mindful that to this day, Katyn presents a moral crisis because the international community has not been able to master the will to redress the legacy of mass extermination of the Polish people by the Soviet Union between 1939 and 1941. Appropriate measures were never implemented to reveal the full truth, to disclose the full scope of the crime, to assure some form of accountability, and to provide an appropriate redress mechanism for the Katyn victims. None of those pillars of international justice was made available to the Katyn and Siberian communities and to the Polish people. The Katyn Institute shall spearhead and stimulate scholarly research into the Katyn crime, defined as mass extermination and mass deportations of the Polish citizens by the Soviet Union between September 39 and June 41. Scholarly research should also address the Katyn lie, cover-up, persecution of the Katyn families, and suppression of the Katyn truth. Only through proactive dissemination of the truth about Katyn will the public overcome its current misleading perception of Katyn as a massacre of the Polish officers in one famous Katyn forest, and be able to view Katyn for what it really represents: mass extermination of the Polish people in as many as possibly 800 forests throughout the Soviet Union, committed in conjunction with mass deportations of their spouses and children to the depths of the Soviet Union, in conditions calculated to bring about their physical destruction. Only through appropriate scholarly research, appropriate incentives will be provided for the body of knowledge to be made available to us, to be adequately researched, properly analyzed, and honestly evaluated. Otherwise, this unrewarding and politically inconvenient field of Katyn study will never develop. The full truth will never emerge. The healing and closure will never be achieved, and the Katyn pattern will continue to emerge and endanger international peace and stability for generations to come. Thank you.